Good evening, everyone. The open meeting law requires that I notify the public that this meeting is being recorded. Therefore, please be aware that an audio and visual recording of this meeting is being made and broadcast by Boston City TV, which is a part of the City of Boston Office of Cable Communications. Now I hand it over to Olivia.
Hi, my name is Olivia Richard. I am the secretary for the Boston Disability Commission Advisory Board, and I would like to call this meeting to order. Let's start with introductions.
Hi, I'm Krista McCosh. I'm the ADA, I'm the ADA Title II Coordinator and the Disability Commissioner for the City of Boston.
I'm Carl Richardson. I'm an advisory board member, and I live in Brighton.
I'm Yardley Sanchez. I'm a commission member, and I live in Dorchester.
Kyle Robidoux, also on the commission, and I live in Roxbury.
Hi, I'm Wes, and I'm a commission member, and I live in the North End.
Okay. On the phone?
Elizabeth Jean Clower, Vice Chair of the Commission, and I live in Back Bay.
Great, thank you.
Let's have a motion for approval of the August minutes.
To approve the minute?
Anyone second?
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Now we have a presentation from a city department.
We actually do not.
Okay, we do not. That makes all the more time for the Kenmore Square project development presentation. Take it away.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me? Is that working? Great. Hi, Damian Chaviano with Mark Development. It sounds like the pressure is now on to use the time wisely. But thank you for having us. We're thrilled to be here today. This is a project that has been in the process now for just under 2 years. And I can tell you, having worked on a number of projects, I don't think there has one that I've seen where the improvements based on the public feedback and the BPDA's feedback have had such a lasting impression. And what I mean by that, what you're going to see tonight is what we think is a pretty progressive approach to finally putting a square in Kenmore Square. And the focus is not based on vehicular movements, it's really based on pedestrian movement. So John Kent from Reed Hildebrand on our team is going to walk you through the materials that we submitted earlier as to what our plan is that we hope to solicit your support on. This is a project that we hope to have a vote in November from BPDA, and our hope is that you'll see the positive merits of this project and join us in supporting this effort. So thank you for having us.
Hi, I'm John Kett. I'm a landscape architect with Reed Hildebrand, and I'm here representing the design team tonight to talk to you about the public realm. So as Damian said, this is a very exciting transformation of Kenmore Square that we're talking about tonight, where we're really reprioritizing what the square is for, from being something that throughout its history has been about moving automobiles through a public space to now having a public realm that's significant for the public to use. If you go to the next slide, the program is a hotel in Kenmore Square. This slide is illustrating the number of developments that are happening in this area. So we're looking broadly at how this development ties back into things that are happening adjacent to the Fenway, also within Kenmore Square with the related development site, and all the way out to the BU Data Sciences Center. If you go to the next slide. The square today, the site is where the Citizens Bank site sits, adjacent to the co-op, really between the intersection of Beacon Street and Commonwealth Avenue. The transformation is to take what is today a corner and move it out into to the center of the square through a reconfiguration of traffic flows and create a center. So if you go to the next slide, this shows the existing and the proposed. It's a little confusing, so I'll try and describe through the changes that are happening here. The essentially the westbound lane of Commonwealth Avenue is being routed to meet Beacon Street. So instead of having that traffic go through the square, it's moving around the square to Beacon Street. And similarly, the eastbound lane of Commonwealth, the westbound lane of Beacon Street is doing the same and being merged into Commonwealth Avenue, essentially creating a rotary circulation pattern within the square. And what that does is it allows us, if you go to the next slide, to take the public realm from what today within this development footprint is about 8,700 square feet. And if you go to the next slide, transform that into over 32,000 square feet of public realm. So it's taking what is essentially space for cars and giving that back over to people. If you go to the next slide, this slide is looking at the plan of the Kenmore development. So in the center of the plan is the hotel. That sits really on a flat iron site. So the site is somewhat triangular as it meets Commonwealth Avenue and Beacon Street. On the north side of the site is a wide plaza that's created underneath a grove of trees for shade. And really the design starts with the logic of pedestrian circulation. So we know the importance in Boston from our work throughout the city of thinking about how pedestrians move first and making sure that that's very clear, particularly to the constituents of this commission. So thinking about how people move through this site and making sure that there are wide concrete pedestrian ways accommodated on all three sides of the property. Those are, those are the lighter tones that are moving through the plaza on each side of the property. Dimensionally, we have on the north side of the building a 10-foot frontage, a 10-foot frontage zone, which is essentially food and beverage for the hotel, a 10-foot sidewalk, which is a concrete sidewalk, which is the pedestrian realm, and then a 30-foot, thank you, 30-foot plaza underneath the canopy of the trees, which is open to the public use. If you go to the next slide, I think one of the most exciting pieces of this transformation is what it does for pedestrian safety and crossings within the square. Not only, I mean, if you think about how you move through Kenmore Square today, most of the crossings land on a median somewhere. So there are multiple crossings that it takes to just move across one street. The longest crossing is 74 feet today, which is a very long crossing and difficult for signal timing as well as just moving people through the intersection. And there's almost a circular circulation the way they're trying to move through all of these diagonal streets. If you go to the next slide, this shows the clear, rational order of the new circulation, which makes very straightforward connections across Beacon Street and Commonwealth Avenue, bringing people to this plaza, so the plaza becomes a landing point on that long crossing. It reduces the longest crosswalk by almost 15 feet, from 74 down to 60 feet for the longest crossing, which is actually the existing crossing of Brookline Avenue, excuse me. The other thing that this does, if you go to the next slide, is it moves people through this public realm. So the experience today of having to get across all of this traffic is actually an experience of moving through a public plaza in this design. And you have choice. So there isn't one way to move through the square. There are multiple ways that people can move through the square depending on where their destination is. If you go to the next slide. There's also a big bicycle safety and circulation initiative that's part of this as well. Today, it's a very dangerous crossing for bicycles coming through Kenmore Square, as they're actually crossing lanes of traffic moving through the square. If you go to the next slide, when the circulation of the roads gets reconfigured, the bicycle is moved onto a bike lane, a protected bike lane above the curb, as opposed to within the street throughout this precinct. And crossings are reduced from having to cross through the square with traffic to being able to move around the square on all three sides. Go to the next slide. And then this is just the zoomed-in version of the current scheme. There are a series of furnishings, of benches that are designed to allow people to engage with the space, but also to facilitate free movement through the space. We know this site has wide fluctuations in usage, from a Red Sox game day where there are thousands of people moving through this site to a regular day where it can be quite quiet. And so we want to be able to accommodate all scales of use within the plaza. Pedestrian comfort is very important, and we've done wind mitigation studies to make sure that these spaces are comfortable for human use and occupation. And so all of that is incorporated into the design as well. If you go to the next slide, this is just looking at those dimensions that I described to you of the 10-foot frontage zone with the food and beverage, the 10-foot sidewalk and pedestrian zone, and the 30-foot plaza furnished in ways that it's flexible for use. If you go to the next slide, this is an axonometric, so starting to look at this three-dimensionally. So again, you can see how all of those different components are coming together to make what we think is a very exciting public realm here for Kenmore Square. The next slide is a rendering view looking from Commonwealth Avenue into the plaza space underneath the canopy of the trees, and you can see in the background imagine the life of the cafe and hotel activating this space as well. And the next slide is another image looking down the length of Commonwealth Avenue, looking west up towards the BU stretch of Commonwealth Avenue, where you see this wide pedestrian sidewalk that's making connections through this plaza. Then the next slide is the last rendering, I believe, looking at the end of the co-op on Commonwealth Avenue. So this is where the Citizens Bank sits today. And even that small pedestrian space becomes what we refer to as the mini plaza. There's a sculptural wall with a bench in it that also is activated as a place for pedestrians. So we're trying to find a diversity of places for people to occupy in the square. And if you go to the next slide, there are also two really interesting public accommodations within the building itself that we wanted to talk about. The first floor is a combination of public lobby space for the hotel and for the Citizens Bank, which goes into the upper level mezzanine of the sort of first floor space. There are connections from Beacon Street to Commonwealth through the central core of the building, and there are public restroom facilities accommodated within that space. So we think that's a very interesting and successful part of the plan. There are also elevators which lead up, if you go to the next slide, to a public rooftop terrace, which is open and accessible to the public at all times. So they're really are thinking about accommodations for the public that go from the public realm all the way up through the building and allow people to experience this great space on top of the city. Thank you.
And that's our presentation. Thank you.
Yes, Carl?
So I'm trying to visualize exactly where this is. Do you know what the street address of that Citizen Bank is? Because I actually know Kenmore Square by the address.
So the address is 560 through 574 Commonwealth Avenue. It's directly across from the Hotel Buckminster and the Uno's Pizzeria at the ground level.
Okay, got it. Okay. So, and how many floors is this hotel going to be?
The hotel will be 29 floors.
So that's quite a bit taller than anything that's in there now, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Have studies been done about how sunlight will be affected?
Yes, we do have shadow studies that were submitted as part of our DPIR filing.
Thank you. I have a question just around it's great to see or hear about the protected bike lane, and the reduced car traffic and the flow and so forth. But can you it was hard obviously to tell based on the slides, but can you go back to the slide where you talked about the protected bike lane and how that moves through? And then just talk a little bit about how that protected bike lane may or may not interact with pedestrian foot traffic in the
Yes.
square?
Yes. So the protected bike lane is on the north side of Commonwealth Avenue and the south side of Beacon Street. Those are the two primary bike lanes coming through the square. Today, those are within the travel lane. In both cases, they've been moved up above the curb. There are areas of refuge at each crossing where between the protected bike lane and the crosswalk, there is a space for pedestrians to congregate, so they're not within the bike lane. And that is and then the other side of the triangle, if you think of this as a triangle of circulation, is on the road that we are aptly calling New Road at this point, which is the new connector between Beacon and Commonwealth.
It's a great name.
On New Road, because of the dimensions that we have there, that becomes what's known as a mixing zone. And so it is actually, and this has been done at several places within the city of Boston, where the bike lane moves into what is a pedestrian zone, and you allow bikes and pedestrians to coexist, but the bike knows that they give right-of-way to the pedestrian, if that makes sense. So it's not necessarily a dismount zone, but it's a zone where the signal on the ground is that the bike lane is moving through a pedestrian space.
Thank you.
Yep. Carl?
So, every night when I go home from work, my wife picks me up and we drive through the Kenmore Square area to go home. That area where Beacon and Commonwealth kind of cross, it's pretty crowded and congested already. Is this,
Yes.
I mean, are we sure this is going to not make it worse, or is this going to ease it? I mean, how do we?
Yes. So we have done traffic studies internally, and we've been working with BTD throughout the process. The requirement at this point is to meet the current circulation performance of the square, which we are currently meeting. We are also having this peer reviewed through a second transportation engineer right now to confirm that all of the assumptions that are being made are correct. But yes, this will have a net positive impact, really not negatively impacting the vehicular circulation and very positively impacting the pedestrian experience.
And also, I'm assuming where all the street crossings do exist, there'll be tactile warning strips and stuff.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Actually, I have a question.
Yeah.
Do we know how this is going to affect MBTA and bus flow?
So it does not affect subway flow at all. And one of the criteria that BTD is challenging us to demonstrate is the 57 bus in particular, moving through the square. And we have a solution for that, which actually did result in the elimination of one crosswalk in order to ease the 57 traffic coming through. So that is a very clear part of the study and a priority.
Hi, this is Wes. I have a question. When construction starts, will there be an issue for people who are being pedestrians in that area, walking through that area? Just, wondering about that for pedestrians as well as bikers.
So we have developed a fairly extensive construction management plan for this stage of the design because we know that's going to be a focus. During the early stages, there'll be protected sidewalks where they exist today. At a certain point when the new road is actually established, which is shortly after demolition and utilities come in, we actually create new crossings that don't exist today. So if you imagine New Road has sidewalks on both sides, the sidewalk on the western end of it would be in place fairly early on and create new crossings across both Beacon and Commonwealth Avenue that don't exist today. And those traffic signals go in very early on, long before the building is going up. The sidewalks and plaza that are around the building itself obviously will not be available until construction is over because we need that space for construction purposes. But actually, I think it's a surprising positive that it opens up these new connections fairly early on because we have to reroute the roads right away.
How would this impact traffic through like the new road? So like people coming down Commonwealth Ave, they'll take a right onto New Road, and then they have to take a left to go continue down Commonwealth?
Correct, yeah,
So-
they would take a right onto New Road and a left onto Beacon.
And so in in a day where traffic is congested, a lot of the traffic is gonna go and probably run into a red light.
So one of the things that this does, and it's you have to sort of imagine this through the traffic engineer's eyes, and it's very hard, even for us, to get our heads wrapped around. Right now, because of the length of crossings through the square, the timing of those lights is very long. So when one circulation route is allowed to go, it goes for a long time, and that slows down other movements coming through the square, and it really slows down pedestrian crossings through the square. With this, the timing of the lights is a much faster cycle. And so, yes, there will be times when you turn to a red light or you run into a red light, but the way that the engineers are choreographing it, it actually, there will be free left turns in certain conditions, and they're doing things to help move cars through the square more quickly.
And I would say one thing that is a simpler way to explain how the improvement works is right now, all pedestrian, bicycle, and vehicular conflicts, you call them, everyone crosses at one spot. This design takes all those crossings and actually moves some of those conflicts away so they happen in different locations. So pedestrians can cross at one point while the conflict's happening elsewhere, and it spreads it out. And that's probably the simplest explanation that I can have for how it actually does offer some improvement.
And that point of conflict that exists now, that's like that little island that you go halfway, you hang out on the island, and
Well,
you cross again.
The point of conflict is really the entire square, but that is what the conflict creates, and you can experience this whenever you try to cross as a pedestrian through Kenmore Square, is you don't ever get one clean movement across the square. You hop to one island and wait, then you hop to the next island and wait. And what this actually does is allows you to move through the square more quickly as you're crossing the road. But if you do get in between crossings, you're not just refuged on this little 6-foot wide island. You're in this public space you might actually want to stay in.
Mm-hmm. Super small potatoes, but will the Boston Marathon course be changed at all as it goes through Kenmore Square? Maybe shortened a little bit?
It actually offers a new viewing location that doesn't exist today.
Oh, yeah.
So
But
it
it doesn't change Beacon at all, coming down under the bridge?
It narrows it by one lane, but I don't think that would matter much because it's the same width as, once you get into the area in front of Hotel Commonwealth.
Yeah.
So I think it's actually a positive.
Accessible pedestrian signals will be in the area, how many signals you're working on, if they'll all be APS?
So, this project itself includes what is 2 or 3 signals, depending on how you categorize it. And so everything that's within the signals that we are installing, we'll be completely reconstructing the main signal that exists today, as well as at New Road, which, it looks like 3 intersections, but that functions as one traffic signal. All indicators and buttons and everything will be up to current ADA standards. That's the extent of our scope.
Is that a new crossing at New Road, a new signal? or
That's
is
a new
that
signal that
existing?
does not exist today. So the only one that exists today is at the main intersection, but the other one is
Did you mention 3 signals?
Those
Those are 2.
It'll look like 3,
Okay.
but it'll function as 2, if that makes any sense.
We'll have audible. What she's asking is if it'll have audible, so will it beep so I know when to cross the street?
So that's certainly something we can accommodate. If that's what's desired, absolutely.
Great.
Now,
If it's
like,
required, yes. I know that always turns into a conflict with the butters, but it's certainly something we would accommodate.
Yes, it's Elizabeth. I know one of the problems that already exists when it's time with snow removal, that with things like medians, who owns it, and that kind of thing, what's going to happen. Is this going to improve things like snow removal efforts, or whose jurisdiction that's under?
So I didn't really follow the question all that well, but so as far as snow removal go, I guess, I understand that it's about snow removal, but is it a question of the public sidewalk space? Who's responsible?
So it's a question of oftentimes in Kenmore Square, because there are so many different medians and little pieces of property
Okay.
within that, there's often some confusion or disagreement as to who owns what, and therefore the onus of snow
Fully
removal is then on those. So will this impact that at all? Is there some sort of formalized plan regarding that?
So I would see this as a positive in that, we'll be going through the Public Improvement Commission process, and an LMI will be established as part of these improvements. And within that, we would, I'm sure, have the agreements and the responsibilities for snow removal within all the areas we're improving, which would be the plaza itself, as well as, the area across New Road. The remainder would be either the Hotel Buckminster or BU. So I guess the answer is there aren't any little orphaned islands that no one knows who they own anymore.
Is New Road a one-way or a two-way?
It's one way.
One way, like coming this way,
Just
right?
one way
Yeah.
coming down.
So how did the car come in? Well, actually, they would just merge the other way. Never mind.
Presentation. I think, let's move on to the chair's report. Jerry?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I apologize for just joining the meeting, but again, transportation sometimes for folks with disabilities can be a bit challenging, so, but my report is fairly brief. Just had a couple of upcoming events and meetings that may be of interest to, our communities and our constituents. On October 2nd, BCIL is having an Art for All event, and I believe that's at 1 p.m. You have no need for any prior experience or artistic talent. They'll be actually decorating Halloween bags for an upcoming event that they're having. So, and like I said, I believe that's at 1 o'clock. And then in November, on the 18th, I believe, is the BCIL annual meeting from 6 to 8:30 at the Transportation Building. And then also at the Transportation Building on the 18th of November is the next RTAG, Riders Transportation Access Group, general meeting. So, and we had one of those last evening actually at the Transportation Building, and what the RTAG focused on during that meeting was just general. We wanted to hear from the community in terms of what they feel is going well with the T and what they feel like needs improvement. Specifically, they asked about, and we heard a lot about folks having complaints regarding the Better Bus project that this body heard about, I believe, last spring. A lot of folks were saying that stops have been eliminated, needed stops that they need, and seniors are having to walk, a couple more stops now than they used to in the past, and stuff. So that's something that we're going to have to keep in mind, as this body, to hear if any of us or any of our constituents have issues. We definitely want to bring those to the T's attention, and it was an eye-opening experience for us to hear that last night. But again, I think that's one reason why that RTAG was created, was to hear those types of issues and to be able to bring those types of issues to to the T's attention. So again, if anybody has any issues with the T and around access, please feel free to either see me, and I can certainly, bring those to the powers that be at the T and at RTAG, and hopefully we can get some of those issues addressed. But with that's basically my report, and now we're on to the commissioner's report.
Thank you, Jerry and Olivia. Great job filling in. Okay, so some things to update the board on. First of all, my staff and I met with the new Parks Commissioner, Ryan Woods. He's Commissioner of Boston Parks and Recreation. So we wanted to get in on his agenda early in his new role so that we could get involved in master planning. I know right now they're working on the Boston Common to spend a lot of the city's money on master planning on the Common. So we want to make sure everything they do is accessible and not only meets ADA code, but exceeds the code. So we're looking at everything they're doing, including the new MLK memorial that's going into the Common as well. So we'll keep you updated on plans. When there's public input, we'll be happy to send you that information. We're also involved with the Boston Public Library's master plan. They have an accessibility committee that I am going to sit on with my architectural staff. So we're looking at a 5-year plan for capital improvements in the libraries. And one of the things that will include is the ramp at the front entrance, which I know the community has advocated for. Right now, there's a temporary ramp in place, but we'll be looking at installing a permanent ramp that meets the character and the look of the building. So that is also in process. We're also going to look at access throughout the library. Right now, there are a few rooms that, although they're accessible, it doesn't provide ideal access by any means. It has an antiquated vertical lift on 2 of the rooms. So we're going to look at improving those spaces and everything else that needs to be upgraded within the library. On a positive note with the libraries, the city is spending a lot of money on refurbishing branch libraries. I know they've done a few that my architectural team has been involved in, and the architects have really listened to us and taken our input. On one of the designs, the first iteration the architect showed us was the front entrance had a ramp and stairs and a ramp next to it. But after consulting with my team and myself, they agreed to integrate the entrance, so it's all just a flush entrance. So it's much more equitable to have everybody enter at the same time. Okay, so yesterday I spoke at a Mass Rehab conference in Worcester. It's the annual employment conference. We were there all day, Jessica and I, and our outreach staff, Melinda. So I gave a workshop on employment for persons with disabilities, and I talked about our collaboration with Mass Rehab. This is our 8th year collaborating with them, and we have 2 programs that we work on. The first one is the summer internship program, and the second one is Disability Mentoring Day. So for the summer internship program, we bring 5 to 10 Boston residents who are job ready into City Hall, and we place them in different departments for a 6-week internship. They get paid a competitive rate, and they get to learn job skills, make connections for references, and test out what they like for jobs in the city. So we currently have 5 interns. It was a little delayed this year, so we did late summer, early fall. This program will culminate in Disability Mentoring Day, which is happening this year on November 1st. And that is a day when we do sort of like the summer internship, but in a mini one-day type of event. We bring 5 to 10 mentees in. We match them with different jobs. They can do job shadowing, ask questions. Then at lunchtime, we do a working lunch with Human Resources Department so they can figure out how to apply for a city job, because sometimes it can be a mystery in trying to figure out the city web system. So that's something that's really helpful. And then in the afternoon, we bring in private employers who are looking to hire people with disabilities, and we do kind of like a round robin for interviews. And we've had a few people get jobs that way, so it's a really great event that we look forward to every year. At the conference yesterday, one of our former interns also spoke. He interned right here in the City Council with Councilor Ed Flynn, and he just got a job with the National Park Service. So it was a great story to hear from him. Also at the conference yesterday, Representative Josh Cutler came, and he spoke about a hearing that's coming up at the State House on Tuesday, October 22nd from 10:30 to 1. And that's a hearing put on by the Workability Subcommittee. And they're going to be talking about ways to improve opportunities for employment for persons with disabilities. If anybody's interested, we'll send around that date if you're interested in attending or possibly participating. Another thing I'm working on with the city is the Small Vehicle Task Force. And this task force came out of the ordinance for small vehicles. The city does not currently allow rental companies like Bird and Lime to put dockless scooters around the city. Many other cities have instituted this program, but we have not. What the council recommended before we implement a program is to study the effects not only on the city and traffic, but also on persons with disabilities and accessibility. So we had our first meeting. We're going to be meeting monthly and then giving recommendations in January. So if anybody has input, I'd be happy to hear it and take it back to the committee. And this committee is talking about everything from electric bikes to electric scooters. I've even seen electric skateboards and many other small vehicles that are on the roads right now. An event I wanted to talk to you about coming up Friday is called Look Both Ways Trading Spaces. It's this Friday, September 20th from 10 to 4. It's going to be on City Hall Plaza. And it's going to be a chance for people to try out different modes of getting across the plaza. For people who, people who aren't familiar with people with disabilities and what they experience when traveling over bricks, there's going to be a group of people who bring wheelchairs for people to try out. And it's a whole day targeted just towards seeing the plaza from a different perspective. So, yes.
So sorry, just to clarify, the event's Thursday and Friday.
Oh, okay.
And the wheelchair demonstration will be from 4 to 6 on Thursday with Empower SCI, which is a nonprofit that works with spinal cord injuries.
Great, thank you. Okay, there'll be a city job fair on Thursday, September 26th from 9 to 5. If anyone's interested in working for the city of Boston, come to the Mildred Ave Community Center. Again, Thursday, September 26th from 9 to 5. And I also want to follow up. I know that the board had asked me to look into scheduling some time with Uber and Lyft. I have not had a chance to do that yet, but that is on my agenda for next week. So hopefully we'll get that scheduled in October or November. That's my goal. One other just update is I do a national call once a month with disability commissioners from across the country. We had our monthly call today at 3, and we talked, we had a really good discussion talking about transition plans and accessibility on sidewalks and streets. So we are going to share best practices across the country so that when people travel, they'll really be able to see similar patterns and similar wayfinding, whether you have a visual disability or a mobility disability. It should be helpful to all get on the same page and implement best practices. And then the only other thing I wanted to update, I wanted to ask Jessica to update you on was she's been working with Age Strong, the former Elderly Commission, on some events that they're putting together. So Jessica, could you give us a brief overview?
Absolutely. I also wanted to highlight that the Neighborhood Career Fair on September 26th is not just for City of Boston jobs. They're going to have over 30 plus employers who are looking to hire people, and that will be from 5:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. So it's not just the City of Boston, which is great. And related to that, semi-related to that, we had our first workshop in a series of Age Strong at Work workshops, which are for adults who are, I believe, over 50, who are looking to get employment in one way or another. And so it's a series of 3. So the first one that we had was this past Saturday, and that was a series of panels on the importance of older adults in the workforce. So the value add that those individuals bring, and kind of discussing some of the challenges that those individuals face. A lot of the things that came up were in related to accommodations. And so we're working for the next time, which will be October 5th, which will be a series of workshops on like resume building, interviewing skills, and we're also looking to secure someone to talk about reasonable accommodations and when to ask for an accommodation related to age or disability, and how to navigate that process as well. And then the last one, which I believe will be November 12th, I believe, that will be a career fair for those individuals. And so it's been very successful so far, and we're excited for the next two. That's all I got, Commissioner.
Yep, that's everything for me, unless people have questions.
So the accessibility group at the library, is that only looking at capital improvements and physical space, or is that also going to be looking at, say, access to media and books and things like that?
We haven't actually met yet. We have our first meeting in October, so I can get you more information then. I think it would certainly make sense to look at digital and communication access, so I can certainly raise that. And I believe it's mostly capital focused, capital improvements, but I really couldn't say at this point.
Okay, it's just something to keep in mind, because I can think of something from the books and the videos and the catalog, that sort of thing, that aren't always accessible to the blind and visually impaired, so just something to think about.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you.
Any other questions for the Commissioner? Either in person or on the phone?
Any questions on the phone for the Commissioner?
Yes, please. So that's exciting about the Uber Lyft having a presentation from them. Could we also have the MBTA present?
Would that be the ride?
Yes, the rides. So if people had questions about the ride pilot, that I guess one of the things that a couple of us, Jerry, the Commissioner and I, anyone else who's interested, maybe could brainstorm ahead of their meeting, is to have it be focused in such a way that it gets at the issues that are most relevant for people with various types of disabilities, rather than just kind of whatever is their usual promo kind of thing, that to be able to have some question and answer time, but also so that they'll come to the meeting prepared to know how many vehicles they have on the road for how many shifts, and those kinds of more specific data-related pieces of information.
Elizabeth, why don't we schedule an executive committee call for the end of this week or early next week? And we can talk about what we really want to get out of the event, like you said, so we can ask them to come prepared, and we can figure out, what we want to get out of the event, and, a good time and place for the event. So Jessica and I will set up a call with the executive committee for, like I said, either late this week or next week.
That's excellent. Thank you.
Good.
Any other questions on the phone?
Nope.
Great.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I just wanted to clarify before we move on to the architectural access update, that the RTAG general meeting on the 18th of November that I mentioned will be from 2 to 4 at the Transportation Building, and the BCIL annual meeting is actually on the 21st from 6 to 8 at the Transportation Building, not the 18th. So just those points of clarification. So next we have the architectural access update with Sarah.
Good evening, everybody. I will try to keep this very brief. I just wanted to mention a few things that have been going on in our office. We are going through the process of updating our Article 80 accessibility checklist, which is a tool that we use with developers to encourage them to go and build beyond building code requirements for accessibility. in the past 2 weeks, Patricia and I have worked with a hotel in the Back Bay to advocate for accessibility within their public space. They've been going through a renovation process through the BPDA, and we've reviewed and provided technical assistance with their public realm sidewalk areas to ensure that it's safe and accessible for everybody. As well as we've been working with Faulkner Hospital during their renovation process to advocate for an accessible route from their bus stop to their hospital. Currently, it's located on a big hill with a giant staircase, so we are currently advocating for them to improve their accessible route, which is now just a sidewalk in poor condition for this project. As well, last week, Patricia testified at the Joint Committee on Public Safety and Homeland Security in support of the AAB bill that is right now going through the State House. And we also have video, so if anybody is curious to see her testimony, I'd be happy to provide that. I also want you guys to be aware of a few public meetings happening within the next few weeks. One of them is an MBTA community meeting, specifically regarding the Green Line Transformation Project, which is a long-term planning process for the MBTA. They've had a few public meetings in Boston so far, but the next one will be September 23rd at the Newton Free Library in Newton, and then September 26th at the Tobin Community Center in Roxbury/Mission Hill. And another meeting is the Blue Hill Avenue Transportation Action Plan meeting, which I will be attending as well, and that's September 25th at KIPP Academy in Mattapan. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I just had 2 comments to add to that. I didn't get to say it, but Patricia is not in attendance tonight because she is over at the airport working on the committee that's working on the Uber and Lyft drop-off at the airport, so she's deeply involved in that. She and I are working on it, and I may be attending the next meeting, but so far we've been kind of double teaming to make sure the city's represented. And then secondly, just to follow up on a few things Sarah said about the AAB, and we as advocates know how critical this legislation is to be passed. And just as evidence of that, on my call this afternoon with the different disability commissions from across the country, we were talking about sidewalk reconstruction and different codes, building codes. And one thing that came up was employee-only areas in buildings. And pretty much every state, every city that's on the call said that they didn't have to have employee-only areas accessible. And I agreed that we also don't either, but I said that we have this legislation pending, which would require employee areas to be accessible. So they were really thrilled to hear that and hope to use that as a model for their cities and states to follow. So we really hope that the bill will pass this time, and then that will provide greater access, opportunities for jobs for persons with disabilities. Carl, do you have any updates on the bill?
So it hasn't been voted out of committee. So the next step is the Homeland and Public Safety Committee will have to vote up and down on whether it should get voted out of committee. If it makes it out of committee, it'll then go to the Senate first because it was 2 senators that wrote the bill, and then it'll get voted out of the Senate and then go to the House. So I can tell you last term, it got voted, it made it out of committee, and then it made it out of the Senate, where it stalled was in the House. So I have a fairly good feeling based on some of the folks that I spoke to. It'll pass out of committee, and it'll pass out of the Senate. So I would urge folks in the room, yes, keep in touch with the Senate, but also I would concentrate heavily on the House of Representatives. So if you have any good contact with your House members, I would talk to them. And we only have till July, guys, because then it'll have to be reintroduced next session, next January, because they're out of session after July this year, because this is an election year. So you basically only have 9 months to make this happen. So that's the update there.
Carl, I just have a follow-up question. So what's your sense? It sounds like you feel like it's going, and this is Jerry, by the way. It sounds like from what you're saying that you feel like it's gonna get out of committee, which is a great step, and it's gonna pass the Senate. But what's your sense in terms of the House? Do you think will get up for a full vote at this point, or?
Well, if it gets out of Senate, it has to come up for vote. Well, it doesn't have to come up for vote. That's up to the Speaker of the House. But I don't want to say what my sense is because I don't really know.
Okay.
I'm basing the fact that it'll get out of committee and pass the Senate based on the past 2 sessions, and I've also spoken to people high in the Senate, so I have a fairly good feeling about the Senate. I haven't spoken to anybody in the House, so I'm not trying to not give you an answer. I just don't know.
Sure.
But I would focus, I mean, I do have a fairly good feeling about getting out of committee, because it's gotten out of committee several times now. The bill's been there, I think, for like 16 years, so this isn't the first time it's been through. And in the past, the lobbyists, meaning the construction folks and some businesses, have said it would cost them too much money. But the good news is, last week, there were several people with disabilities in the room, and I think it was heard. And so I'm feeling slightly more optimistic than in the past, but I think we need to keep the pressure on.
Is there anybody specifically in the House that we should focus our advocacy efforts on?
Well, I would talk about that offline. I'm not going to mention online who, I mean, obvious, but yes, I mean, I would just contact your personal legislator, and then we can talk later.
Okay. Thank you. And, Sarah, I just had a question for you.
Sure.
Where's the hotel on the Back Bay
It's the top, yeah.
that you're working with?
Yes, so we were working with, still are working with the Taj Hotel
Okay.
located on Newbury Street. So the importance of the public realm on Newbury Street is very important.
Right. And also with the Faulkner, are there plans to make to do away with that long staircase, or what's the issue?
Not currently.
Okay.
So right now they're going through a permitting or approval process with the Boston Planning and Development Agency. And part of my role at the commission, we're involved in that process. So we are advocating for them to find alternative ways that are accessible up that hill. And I think the consultants that the project team has hired has the creative ability to find these solutions. So we're working with them on an ongoing basis.
Great. Well, keep us updated, definitely.
Will do.
Thank you. All right. Next on the agenda is old business. Does anybody have any old business?
I have one question.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. John Kelly had contacted us to see if we had ever sent the letter about opposing physician-assisted suicide. Jessica, do you know if we had sent that letter?
Yes, it was sent out. I can send John Kelly a copy of it.
Great, thank you.
Any other old business? Does anybody on the commission have any new business? Yes, Carol.
This is just information more than anything else. Because next month is Disability Employment Month, as we heard, there's a number of events going on. And I will send your office the information tomorrow, but we are also hosting an event on October 16th at the State House. We have about 20 employers who are looking to hire. We also have a benefit specialist who will work with people, who will explain how their benefits will be impacted if they get a job. We will have Math Match there talking about the loan program for assistive technology, and I think Easter Seals will be there for their loan program as well. So it should be an interesting event. I will send information out tomorrow, but again, that's on October 16th from 10 to 2 at the Massachusetts State House on the second floor.
Great. Thank you. Any other new business, either by anybody here or on the phone? Hearing none. Does anybody from the public have any input or would like to make any comment? If you could make your way to the nearest microphone and state your name. It's okay.
My name's Lisa Ewan. I live in Roxbury Crossing, Mission Hill.
Great.
Aside from some basic community things, I do have a question because the Abilities Expo is not returning next year. And this is a very big hit for a lot of people in the community. And I would just like to throw it out there that I'm hoping that we can find some way of bringing something somewhat similar to the city of Boston next year, even if, we just contact vendors and see if we can make something on a smaller scale. And that actually comes out of a lot of people who I've spoken to who depend on the expo to actually get their equipment repaired. And without it, they're not going to get their equipment repaired or even be able to sort of move around. It's the best place I've gotten information since I moved back to Boston, of even you guys. And I know that it would be helpful if we had something to continue. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there.
I can say that, yeah, we were also very disappointed that it won't be returning. I do keep in touch regularly with the show owner, David Corse. So he had explained to me that they couldn't get the convention center for those dates next year. So why don't I follow up with him and see if there's any possibility of them coming back, if not next year, the year after, because it is such a great event, and I know it's very helpful for the disability community.
Just for next year.
When I spoke to David, it sounded like he was saying it was permanent.
It is definitely permanent. Actually, they've given the Boston Weeks to Phoenix.
Yeah.
And given that Washington moved to Dallas and Boston is going to Phoenix, I'm kind of getting a slant that there will be nothing on the East Coast because it's a California-based organization.
There is one in New Jersey, right on the New York line.
Right,
That
which-
happens in May, I believe.
Yeah, and it's really hard to get to by public transit.
It is, yeah.
I'm ready to go to Toronto, which is the easiest one to get to, ironically. But it just seems that we have a very large disabled community here, and we have a large number of people who really benefit from it. And it's not like we have low numbers. The numbers it was actually in the book for the trade shows for next year. And then it got transferred to Phoenix.
Yeah, it was very disappointing, but I'll follow up with David.
And the other, I know this is probably not the forum for it, but it's an MBTA/community problem. So I live right across the street from the Roxbury Crossing train station, which, if I want to get on the train, there's never a human being in there to actually help you. And it took me like 5 tries and 4 Uber rides to finally realize that you have to pick up the emergency telephone. But I've also talked to my neighbors who don't get on the train over there because there's nothing that indicates how you can actually get help.
Is that for the bridge plate?
For the bridge plate, which apparently is tied to the wall, but you just can't get from here to there. And a lot of times there's nobody to help you. And I'm relatively new back to Boston. and I'm very new to my chair and I. So as a bad driver and on a good day, trying to get on the train, which I tried once without the bridge plate, that was much more interesting, but you did learn the kindness of your neighbors who will pick your wheelchair up with you in it and put it on the train. But it certainly seems like a problem because I've had that problem at Roxbury Crossing ever since I got back, and I've tried communicating it to the MBTA, aside with the 4 billion, hi, why does the ride never pick me up on time? And nobody ever tells you what to do or even helps.
Where did you report it, at the MBTA?
I talked to them at the transportation building, and they assured me that there's always a person at the station. No, there's not. No. I've never seen a person at that station. Well, except for the one day that the trains were not running, and then they put a person there to tell you the train's not running, but you can't get across the very pockmarked number of holes to get to the bus, so you're kind of like stuck.
Did you file a formal complaint?
I filled out the little piece of paper that they gave me, and they said somebody would get back in touch with me, which they never did.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a phone number to call to register a complaint, and you should get a ticket number.
Right.
And then they're supposed to call you back. So I was just calling the number, even though you already did report it, just to make sure you get the ticket number.
And I'd be happy to give you that number.
That would be great.
Go ahead, Olivia.
Can I just follow up on that one question? Jerry, do you know, because you're on RTAG, is that correct?
Yeah.
Do you know about staffing at MBTA stations?
I don't know how many are supposed to be staffed. We did hear a lot, lot of issues last night with, they're gonna be undergoing new training with the customer service representatives, and we know that they're not meeting the needs of the community right now, so this is good feedback to have, but I would definitely encourage you, again, to lodge that complaint formally, just so that there's a record of it, and again, hopefully, someone will get back to you. I do not know how, the staffing for Roxbury Crossing. I am very familiar with that station, though, and I'm not surprised that you're having difficulties with it, so go ahead, Olivia.
I can second what you're saying. There is never a staff member of any type at Roxbury Crossing, except if there's something going wrong. It's a known pattern.
Do you also use the bridge plate?
I do. And I travel there frequently because that's where my physical therapist is.
Would I be able to suggest, to ask the board if you want to vote to write a letter about these concerns, if you're interested, either to RTAG or to the T?
Can you say that again, Carl? Can you say that again, Carl?
I make a motion that we draft such a letter.
Okay.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
And what I will also try to do is I'll try to get staffing information from the T for each one of the stations to see when they're supposed to be staffed and so forth, and what the current numbers are. And if I get that information prior to the next meeting, I can certainly forward it to the commissioner and/or Jessica, and we could send out an email or something.
Olivia, as a secretary, would you be willing to draft a letter, since you know the issues as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great, if you share it with us, we can work on it together.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Olivia, and thank you, ma'am. I see someone else has a question. I'm sorry, Elizabeth. Go ahead.
Elizabeth?
Yes. In follow-up about, in the absence of, in the future of having the the Ability Expo, I wondered if there's ways we could think of other ways, things like whether it's wheelchair repair or other ways to assist people in the disability community with equipment might be handled. But there are such things such as the MIT assistive technology hackathon, but that's for a limited number of people. And if you've participated in the past, you aren't necessarily allowed to participate again. That they choose among projects. And I just think it is an unserved need. And as I said, not limited to wheelchairs, but I don't know if there's some kind of partnership or collaboration that we might brainstorm about at future meetings, or something to help fill that void in future years.
Would I also be able to suggest that the board draft a letter to the Abilities Expo company and see if they would be willing to look at Boston again? And again, this is just a suggestion. You don't have to take a vote, but.
That would be great, I think.
Is that you making a motion, Jerry?
I don't think I as the chair can make a motion, but
Carl, did you offer?
Yes, I'd like, as long as I don't have to write the letter, I'd like to make a motion to have a letter sent to the Abilities Expo to reconsider coming back to Boston.
any seconds? All in favor?
Aye.
And I'd be happy to help draft the letter and work with the commissioner and staff on it.
Great.
I have an outside voice.
Wait,
The one thing I
I'm sorry, just for communication purposes?
Okay, no problem.
Yeah, just for captioning, we gotta have you coming through the mic.
I'll stand beside this handsome gentleman. The one thing I did reach out to Boston University, and they actually have space, and they have their engineering students who are in biomedical engineering, and they could do it on a limited basis. But I think they just need a little encouraging to make it something different. So that it was just not, like, because MIT does the hackathon, and BU was very interested in maybe doing something somewhat similar. But that was just an informal conversation with them yesterday, so.
Great. Yes, sir, if you could state your name.
My name is Richard Wepman. I live at 10 Bowden Street, Boston, Massachusetts, right on the edge of Beacon Hill. I live on the downtown side of the street. I park in a handicap spot on the Beacon Hill side of the street. I don't have a resident parking sticker because I do not own a car anymore, and you can't get a resident parking sticker unless you own a car. I rent cars. So on about a dozen occasions this far, I have parked in the handicapped parking space with my handicap placard across the street from my house, which is in the Beacon Hill residential area. I have gotten tickets, and the last one, which I got yesterday, I brought in and they invalidated it and said, no problem. But they said, dismissed warning, resident will not park in resident permit area by any amount. There must be some way that either the ordinance, which I believe for the handicap placard states that they're not supposed to time limit me, and I don't believe the intent of the handicap placard is not to create accommodation. And somewhere along the line, it's the right hand telling the left hand, telling the right hand, going to the parking clerk that hands out the ticket, who has been told or maybe not communicated that he shouldn't do it. Common sense should tell him he shouldn't do it, but they do issue the tickets. And when you bring it back, they take the ticket off, but then they tell you that, well, you can't do it even though you live there. and they send you, well, then why don't you talk to 311? So you send to 311 and they say everything's in place, everything's fine, the signs are fine, the space size is fine, but then I end up, and so now I'm back up to here because I found out that you people were meeting today, and I decided, why not give it a shot and see if I can just get it resolved the easy way, which is for the city to just say, we need to stop ticketing handicapped people with handicap placards in handicapped spaces because they're not in, because they are in a residential side of the street. I think it's wrong, it's not an accommodation, and to sum it up, it just needs some internal clarification to resolve it. And I would like you people to direct the city departments that are involved in this to stop ticketing people who have handicap placards in a handicapped space in a residential area with tickets for $60 and then invalidating them and saying that the person is wrong for parking in those spaces. And I would request that this is an internal City of Boston affair and that it be done strictly as that without taking it to court or getting a judgment from the court saying you can't do this. Because I don't think anyone here, if you're on the Disabilities Commission, disagrees with me. And
Can I ask, did you get all your tickets dismissed, just as a point of information?
yes, I did. I got all the tickets dismissed.
And do you know the address where that space is located?
It's 3335 Bowden Street.
Okay. And did you notice if on the sign it said, on the accessible sign, it said resident parking only?
No. On the handicap sign, it does not say that. It only says it as a residential side of the street.
Okay.
And I'll be more than glad to email to somebody pictures, and also if you want to make copies, or I'll email copies of the removal of the ticket, where it clearly states that I'm not supposed to be parking there. I think my solution is either it be done internally, or that since you can't modify the handicap placard because it's a state-issued placard, but an envelope of some sort with a resident parking sticker could be issued by the parking clerk, which would mean that as long as I have my placard sealed inside my parking permit thing once a year, I would come and I would bring my handicap placard, and it would be made into a City of Boston placard. I know in the state of California, because I have to do this, is they ask you to request a state of California handicap placard, but they want to see your Massachusetts handicap placard. They want to physically see it, so you have to mail it in to them, I believe, and they will issue you a local one, which is limited to 90 days or something like that. But I think there's an accommodation, a reasonable accommodation that can be done by the city. But even more, I think it's just as easy for the parking clerk to just say to his ticketers, you're no longer allowed to ticket a handicap placard or a handicap plate, regardless of whether it's in a handicap spot or a residential spot. But if a person's handicapped, the intent of the Massachusetts law, which is higher than the city law, is that the person should be able to park there in a non-time limited basis. I don't think you're going to find there are going to be 500 people with handicap placards parking on Beacon Hill or any other district of the city. I think.
Can I ask, you said you rent a car. Is that the reason why you don't have a resident sticker?
And then when I said, can I get a sticker for the rental car? They said, well, not short term.
So you'd have to lease the car long term?
Yeah. And the reason I do this is because we've all been told not to drive in the city anymore. We're supposed to be green. And so partaking in the green movement, we gave up our car. And I found that I can get one-day rentals from Hertz for $35, and I can rent them 10, 20 times a month, and it's still cheaper than owning a car. So I think there are a lot of people, from what I've heard, that are non-handicapped that are doing this, and I think this is an accommodation that the city needs to figure out how to put it together. And I'll be more than glad to leave my contact information to give you copies that you can verify, that you can take to the parking clerk. I'll meet with you and the parking clerk, or someone with the parking clerk. But I believe that this can be resolved and we can just move on.
I'd be happy to talk with you offline, but thank you for raising these concerns.
Okay. Okay, thank you for listening to me.
Thank you.
And I'm glad that you heard. And on the other point too is there are a lot of people who can't speak out, who are paying $60 for tickets that shouldn't be getting $60 tickets. And whether they're residents of the city of Boston or not, I think it's not a very elegant way of handling it. Thank you very much for your time.
Commissioner, can I just ask a question?
Sure.
It's Jerry. Of you, actually. What is the, I mean, are you supposed to have a resident sticker, in addition to your placard in order to park in a neighborhood, or?
If you park in a non-accessible space, just a standard space, in a neighborhood that has resident parking, you have to have a resident sticker. If you park in an accessible space, you'd have to read the signs, and that's why I asked you if there was anything on the sign, because the city has begun installing signage on some accessible signs that say resident sticker required. So if it didn't have that language on there, you shouldn't have gotten the ticket, and that's why it would be dismissed. So some spaces do have a residency requirement, and that's because people come into like East Boston, park in an accessible space, a car from New York,
Right.
and go to Logan Airport and go away for a weekend, and it really denies the residents of the neighborhood that space. So by request, we've begun installing those.
So this is Richard again. So then my question is, so how do I need a parking placard that says I am a resident? And since the state issues the placard, the only thing I can think of is to put maybe an RFID sticker that would allow the parking clerk to walk by and just hold it up to the placard, and if it rings, it's a legitimate placard. If it's not, it's not. And I also think that may solve a lot of the problems of fake parking placards too, because
But you didn't get, your fine wasn't for a placard, is that correct? Just to clarify?
it was just for a residential.
For resident, okay.
And parking in a resident park.
So the parking clerk's requirement is there has to be a vehicle registered at your address in order to get a resident sticker.
Right, but I'm saying it needs to be expanded to allow people that can document that they live in the city and that they own a car, or don't own a car, but that they rent, or they have people who may drop them off. What if Aunt Cecilia comes into town with you and says, I'm going to stay the night with you, you're not too well, I dropped you off at your parking, and we're going to park in the handicap spot because it's open. There's got to be a little more leeway, and I'm not going to tell you how to accomplish it, because that's not my position, but I would think the commission should give guidance to the parking clerk and say to the parking clerk, this is what we want. Okay?
All right, I'll be happy to talk with you even after the meeting if you'd like.
Yeah. But there's got to be some guidance within the city. And if it doesn't happen, then I guess the only choice is to just go for summary judgment or something in front of the judge, and they'll just say, sorry, but the whole city now, you can't give out tickets. I mean, somebody's going to challenge it if you don't rectify it. It probably won't be me because I'm just not a court person, but you get the point. And I will speak to you right after the meeting. Thank you. And thank you, everybody who's on the phone, et cetera, for listening to me.
Thank you for bringing it to our attention. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
This is Carl, absolutely. I make a motion.
Any seconds?
Second.
Olivia seconds, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everybody.